Hello YouTube, it's Barbara Jean. Oh, I forgot to turn off the phone. I should do it. I'm just going to probably ramble a little bit today. I've got a couple of things I want to talk about, but nothing major. I haven't had any major revelations lately. But just some things I've been thinking on. But also, I do have an announcement. Remember I told you I was going to tell you when the brain surgery stopped? Well, it hasn't stopped, unfortunately. But something has stopped. Something has stopped. And I want to read a couple of verses first of all. Where are we going to start first? Let's go to... Maybe I should start with Genesis. Just a second. I'm thinking out loud. Thinking out loud. Genesis chapter 3. The fall of man and woman in the garden. The fall of man and woman started with a serpent speaking to Eve. Now the serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field which the Lord had made. And he said unto the woman, Yea, hath God said, You shall not eat of every tree of the garden? And the woman said unto the serpent, We may eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden, but of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden God hath said, You shall not eat of it, neither shall you touch it, lest you die. And the serpent said unto the woman, You shall not surely die. For God doth know that in the day ye eat thereof, then your eyes shall be open, and you shall be as gods, knowing good and evil. So it started out with the serpent speaking to Eve. And Eve, not knowing what a lie was, or not really understanding what was going on, she was gullible. She fell into disobedience to the Lord and ate the fruit. Okay, so it started out with a lie. It started out with someone whispering something into her ear, or telling her something that she should not have listened to, but she didn't know that. She was unaware of that. So she listened and she fell. So it started out with a voice, even though she knew the voice of the master, because when Adam and Eve both fell, later in the same Genesis 3, it starts out, we heard the voice of the Lord. Adam and Eve heard the voice of the Lord, Genesis 3:8, and they heard the voice of the Lord walking in the garden in the cool of the day. Adam and his wife hid themselves from the presence of the Lord amongst the trees of the garden. So the Lord must have been calling out to them, Adam, Eve, Adam, where are you? So they heard the voice of the Lord. So basically they hearkened to the voice of the serpent rather than hearken to the voice of the Lord. They hid from the voice of the Lord. Now let's go to John 10. John 10. Let's see if I can find it. This is a parable the Lord told about the Good Shepherd. Verily, verily, I say unto you, he that entereth not by the door is into the sheepfold, but climbeth up some other way, the same is a thief and a robber. But he that entereth in by the door is the shepherd of the sheep. To him the porter openeth, and the sheep hear his voice. And he calleth his own sheep by name, and leadeth them out. And when he putteth forth his own sheep, he goes before them, and the sheep will follow him. They know his voice. And the stranger they will not follow, but will flee from him, for they know not the voice of the stranger. This parable spake Jesus unto them, but they understood not what things they were which he spake unto them. Then said Jesus unto them again, Verily, verily, I say unto you, I am the door of the sheep. All that ever came before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep will not hear them. I am the door. By me, if any man enter in, he shall be saved, and he shall go in and out and find pasture. The thief comes not but to steal, and to kill, and to destroy. I am come that they might have life, and that they might have it more abundantly. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd giveth his life for the sheep. But he that is the hireling, and not the shepherd, whose own sheep they are not, seeth the wolf coming, and leaveth the sheep, and fleeth. The wolf catcheth them, and shattereth the sheep. The hireling fleeth, because he is a hireling, and careth not for the sheep. I am the good shepherd, and I know my sheep, and am known of mine. As the Father knoweth me, even so know I the Father, and lay down my life for the sheep. And other sheep I have, which is not of this fold, them I must bring, and they shall hear my voice, and there shall be one fold and one shepherd. I think that's all I'm going to speak on that, our last verse on that. But I want to really just talk about how we hear his voice. Oh, the Song of Solomon. Let's go to Song of Solomon first. Song of Solomon. This is the last one I'm going to read for now. Song of Solomon. This is the bridegroom and the bride. Starting in verse 8. The voice of my beloved. That's how it starts. Song of Solomon 2:8. The voice of my beloved. Behold, he cometh leaping upon the mountains, skipping upon the hills. It's beautiful. So she hears the voice of her beloved, and it's like a deer on mountains coming, leaping towards her. It's beautiful. Anyway, the announcement I want to make is, remember a few weeks ago I said that the Lord took me to hell. At least in my dream. I was asleep one evening, and I was told while I was playing in the water and having a great time, I had to go down to hell. And I said, oh, okay. All right, I'll go if you want me to go. So it was basically my attitude. And I went down in this elevator, kind of like a shaft, down into, it wasn't into the bowels of hell. It wasn't into the fiery furnace parts of hell. It was into what looked like a music studio. It was sound waves. I saw music equipment like you would see in a music studio, where they have all those gadgets, and they're adjusting the sound waves and the frequencies and all that sort of thing. And anyway, I told you that came back to my mind just recently, because this last week something interesting has happened, or should I say hasn't. Well, it's been happening but not happening. Let me explain it. Anyway, the Lord showed me that Satan uses sound frequencies to agitate people. I mean, it's well known. I think just recently they discovered that, but at the time of Hitler, that they changed the sound tuning forks, that they changed the tuning frequency for orchestras to a lower level, or to a level that would cause agitation, rather than the proper tuning that would actually bring peace to people's minds. But it was done deliberately, that they had changed the tuning frequency. And you can look that up, but I think I remember something about that. And but it's interesting that that was done, because maybe that has something to do with what I've been hearing. Remember, one of my last videos, I said how I was feeling really normal. Well, I've been feeling really normal, like normal. It's hard to explain. I'm just trying my best here. I'm trying to do my best here. Okay, let's go back further. Years ago, I started having this ringing in my ear, and I don't remember if I had it when I was a young child, but I do remember it starting when I was a teenager, and I do remember it starting when I was a teenager. Now, it could have started around the time that I received this thorn of suffering in my heart, when I was in my early teens, when I gave my heart to Jesus. I could have started then, but I don't recall whether I had it before. But I had this ringing in my ear, particularly it happened in either ear, but mostly it would happen in my right ear. Okay, um, and it always starts with this very strange phenomena. All of a sudden, it's like someone flicks a switch. It's the only way I describe it. It's like someone flicks a switch in my head, and all of a sudden, momentarily, just for a moment, like a split second, everything goes quiet. Everything in the room is like all the noise shuts off for just a moment, split second or less, and then all of a sudden this starts. When I was younger, that ringing would sometimes last up to 3, 4, 5 minutes. This would continue. As I got older, and the more and it would often happen sometimes 3 to 7 times a day. This ringing, the same thing. The little switch in my head goes off, and this momentary quiet, and then starts this buzzing sound. And I wouldn't so say it was a buzz. It was more of a ring. Um, it lasts, like I said, anywhere from a minute to maybe 5 minutes, and then it would stop. And it wasn't I think it's called tinnitus. Tinnitus. Anyways, that's the symptom. It could cause actually quite a bit of depression when it's this constant ringing in the ear, and it can be very distracting. Maybe it was, I don't know, but I do know in my early 20s when it became really problematic, when I had a time when there was this ringing that would be continual. I couldn't stop it. It was getting more and more and more and more, and I couldn't turn it off. And I mean, it wouldn't last more than a minute. It would last several, I mean, sometimes an hour, 2 hours. And I was getting it was very depressing. I have to tell you, it was very, very depressing. And anyway, one day I finally got really sick and tired of it. And I said, Lord, you got to do something about this. I cannot live with this anymore. I was in my 20s by this time. I said, Lord, I can't live with this anymore. You've got to do something. The very next day, this pea-sized, hard, waxy pea thing, it was like the size of a small pea, popped out of my ear. And that continual ring stopped. Okay. So apparently that's what tinnitus, or whatever it's called, can be caused by wax. And this was a very small, hard, like I said, it was very, very hard, and the size of a small pea popped out of my ear the next day. But then I continued to have this ringing in my ear. I mean, it would continue from, like again, from a minute to 5 minutes. And that over the years, I noticed something that it was happening was that the ringing began to get a little shorter. It wasn't 5 minutes long. Sometimes it would only last 2 minutes, 1 minute, 30 seconds. But it continued to happen 3 to 7 times a day. Now, over the last few years, again, I always knew when it's going to come on. It's a momentary switch, and it goes quiet. Everything shuts off. The sound of the fan, the refrigerator, everything. It's like someone turns off the sound for a moment, and then this ringing starts. But what's interesting, and this is the announcement, is in that last few days, I think it stopped altogether. In the last few months particularly, I've noticed that the ringing had gotten softer and softer and softer. And in fact, it got to the point where it was barely, I could barely hear it. But it still had that still little flick of everything going quiet. And then the ring would start. Particularly in the last few days, I've been listening for it. Because it would go off almost like clockwork. And I've been listening and listening, and I've heard it. It was so soft. It was that so soft, I had to really listen to hear if it was going off, this little alarm clock in my head. And in the last day or so, I haven't heard it at all. Now, what has that got to do with anything? I believe, personally, that it's a sign that we are seeing the sun and the moon come together in unity, go across the whole of the United States from one end to the other in this total solar eclipse. We know that before the day of the Lord, the sun goes dark, the moon turns into blood. Well, we've seen the blood moon 4 times at least in the last few years. We've also seen eclipses, but this is a unique eclipse, the one that's going all the way across America with the moon in front of it. The moon is completely clothed in the sun. What is this a sign of? I believe this is a sign that the church is now without spot or wrinkle. Remember, I've been telling you that the church has to defeat the synagogue of Satan. There's a sect of people who believe that the rapture of the church could have happened any time. I don't believe so. I believe there had to be some the church had to mature. I believe the church had to come to maturity. I believe the church had to come to the place where the voice of Satan would not be heard, that she would not listen. The church will not listen to the voice of the hirelings or the voice of Satan, that she only responds to the voice of her beloved. And that's why I read those verses, because I think that's where we are. Remember, in that dream, when I was telling you, I saw the sound equipment and this ringing, this high-pitched frequency. To me, it was Lord saying, that's the voice of Satan, and to cause agitation, to cause confusion in the church. And he has now turned off that frequency in the mind of the bride of Christ. Turned off that frequency so that she cannot hear his voice any longer through trials, through tribulations, through testing. We have got to the point where we are no longer tuned in to the voice of Satan and to his lying frequencies. We have got to that place where we're only able to hear the voice of the beloved on the mountain of spices. We are tuned out to Satan and tuned in to Christ. And Satan is no longer able to deceive the bride. As Eve was deceived, we are no longer deceivable. We've reached that place of being without spot or wrinkle. This is important. The Lord has been bringing me a lot in the last few weeks to the passage in Ephesians about husbands and wives. We know that God is preparing a bride for his son. Ephesians chapter 5, the Lord keeps bringing me back to Ephesians chapter 5. And it's the passage about husbands and wives. Why? Because we are the wife of Christ. We are his bride. Let's just read that passage. Husbands and wives. Wives, submit yourselves unto your own husbands. That is, tune out the voice of the serpent. You no longer are going to listen to anyone other than your own husband. Christ is our own husband, and we do not hear any other voice but his. That frequency has been turned off. Why? Because now we're without spot or wrinkle. Now because we have grown up. And like Eve, we now have the full knowledge of good and evil. We know the fullness of evil. We now know the fullness of good. We know that God's ways are good and evil. Satan's ways are evil. We are no longer going to be deceived by his lies and deceptions. Wives, submit yourselves unto your own husbands as unto the Lord. For the Lord is the head of the wife, even as Christ is the head of the church. He is the Savior of the body. Therefore, as the church is subject unto Christ, so let the wives be to their own husbands in everything. Husbands, love your wives, even as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for it, that he might sanctify it and cleanse it with the washing of the water by the word, that he might present it to himself a glorious church, not having spot or wrinkle or any such thing, but that it should be holy and without blemish. So ought men to love their own wives as their own bodies. He that loveth his wife loveth himself. For no man yet ever hated his own flesh, but nourisheth and cherisheth it, even as the Lord the church. For we are members of his body, of his flesh, and of his bones. For this cause shall a man leave his father and mother, and shall join unto his wife, and the two shall be one flesh. This is a great mystery, but I speak concerning Christ and the church, the mystery of the sun and the moon going together across America. Nevertheless, let every one of you in particular so love his wife, even as himself, and the wife see that she reverence her husband. This sign of this eclipse that is coming up in a couple of days is not just any sign. This is huge. It is huge. It's a huge sign that the church has now matured. She is now come into her fullness. What is this eclipse called? The Valley of Totality? Totality? Consummation? Totality? Consummation? Completeness? Fullness? Is it a coincidence? Another coincidence? I don't think so. And why is it going across America? Because in my mind, this is what I believe. This is another thing that's coming to my head when I'm thinking about all of this. Is that what does the world call, I mean, the Muslim world particularly, call Israel and America? Big Satan and little Satan. That's what they call us. Why? Because we belong to the Lord. I believe America is going to go through a time of tribulation. They will go through a time of tribulation. But I don't believe that Satan will be able to destroy this country, because I believe that America represents New Jerusalem. There has to be a physical manifestation of a spiritual truth. In heaven, there is the New Jerusalem, which will have all peoples. Israel right now and in Jerusalem right now is the land for the Jews. Think about that. It's the land for the Jews. But America is the land for all people who've come in, but who you've had this Antichrist spirit come in, try to change the laws, try to change the times, try to change everything in order to defeat the new lamb that God gave the Christians and the Jews to live together, and not just them, not just Christians and Jews, but all people to come into, if they were willing to follow the laws. Okay? The same thing in heaven. We have down here, we have Jerusalem, who is for the Jews alone, really. But you have America, which was for to gather all people, and that's what Jesus did. When he first came to the Jews first, and then the gospel spread to the whole world, to bring them all into his kingdom, every tribe and kindred and tongue. If you think about who's going to be in the temple, every nation is going to be represented in the temple. Let's see, Revelations chapter 7. Verse 9, and after this, behold, and lo, a great multitude, which no man could number, of all nations and kindreds and peoples and tongues, stood before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed with white robes and palms in their hands, and cried with a loud voice, Salvation to our God, which sitteth upon the throne, and unto the Lamb. These are people who worship Jesus Christ. America has represented the New Jerusalem in heaven. And God will collect peoples from every nation and kindred and tribe to live in his White House before he brings the Great Tribulation on. I believe, in my personal opinion, that America will survive the Great Tribulation. She will have to go through tribulation, most definitely. I believe that she will be under the thumb of the Antichrist, but she will survive, because she will not bend her knee to the Antichrist. Millions and millions and millions of people will rather give their heads than give their knee to the Antichrist, which will save America, believe it or not. Just like in Israel, when the Antichrist shows up in the temple, there will be millions of people who'd rather flee than to live in the city of Jerusalem with the Antichrist on the throne. There will be a remnant who will survive. There is a connection. There is a spiritual connection between Israel and America that is very, very important, which is why Satan wants to destroy them both, because he knows that without destroying them both, he cannot rule and reign on the whole world and take over and defeat God the way he'd like to. He cannot. And guess what? He won't defeat God when he sits in the temple, nor when he comes against the people of America. He still will lose. We know the end of the story. Those people unwilling to bow their knee to the Antichrist and rather have their heads cut off will defeat the Antichrist. I know it sounds crazy, but this is what the book of Revelation says. We see that those people, Revelation, where is it? We see the 144,000, and then we see these people who had given their lives to the, I think it's Revelation chapter 18. Is it the fall of Babylon? Or is it 17? Oh, wait, gotta find it here. Oh, gotta find it. The harvest of the earth happens in Revelation chapter 14. Okay, so we see the 144,000. We see their rapture. Satan can't touch them because they're sealed with they're sealed before the tribulation begins. So the Satan cannot touch them. They're raptured here in Revelation chapter 14. You see that they're singing a song to the Lord. But then you see this great harvest of the earth. And that's the end of Revelation chapter 14, starting at verse 14. There's this great harvest. They defeat Satan. They defeat the beast by not taking the mark of the beast. That's how they defeat Satan. That's how they defeat him. This is an amazing book. This is an amazing book. So anyway, in my personal opinion, the Antichrist will rise, but he will not rise in his own power. We've seen him, he's losing his authority right, left, and center. He's falling like a rock. But he will rise again. But he will not rise in his own authority. He will rise with the authority of the dragon. The dragon will have to give him his authority in order for him to take over. But he will still lose because millions would rather die than live under his control. And I believe that will be the cleansing of America. America will be restored in the millennial reign. America will be restored. And that's why there will be a wall around it. It will be the physical manifestation of a spiritual truth. Now, I hope that you're understanding what I'm saying here. Israel will remain, America will remain, and so will other countries, but there's some countries that will not. They will be completely destroyed, but I believe that God has his hand on America. But she will see some tribulation. She will be judged. She will have to go through some process of cleansing. But anyway, thank God it will only be a 7-year period. It could have lasted a lot longer, but God in his mercy will shorten those days. Oh, anyway, I think I've gone off topic a little bit, but I'm just so excited because when the Lord was showing me this, like this whole ear thing, this ringing in the ear, and the last couple of days I have not had any ringing in my ear, and going back to that ringing in the ear can cause depression. Well, depression is when you're not in alignment with God. Isn't that true? I mean, think about it. Depression. Why are you depressed? Because you're not fully yourself. You're not. You feel like you haven't come into your Well, it's Satan talking to you, basically. It's what it is. It's Satan telling you you're never going to be what you're going to be, or you don't have a purpose, and you might as well give up. You might as well kill yourself. Depression comes in all kinds of forms. It's a sort of sadness, a separation. It could be from a death of a family member. It could be caused by all sorts of things. But depression isn't God's will for His church. His will for His church is joy and fullness and happiness and peace that passes all understanding. Joy in the Lord and love, God's everlasting love. It's perfect, um, and that's what He wants for His church. That's what causes depression, when you don't know who you are in Christ. And this is, I believe, the sign, this frequency that's I can no longer hear it. It's gone. And like I said, I've been listening for it. I've been listening for it, and that's how it started. I mean, last few days, that's what I could barely hear it. And I was really listening hard, and now I can't hear it at all. Usually by this time, I've had it this ringing go off at least 2 times by now, and then I haven't heard it. So this sign that going across America, yeah, it's a sign of judgment for the world, but it's a sign of great blessing for the church. It's a sign of extreme blessing for the church, the bride. I believe it's a sign that the church is now without spot or wrinkle. Like I said, I'm still experiencing the brain surgery, but the ringing has stopped. So the moment I stopped having the brain surgery, I'll let you know. But to me, this is exciting stuff. This is really, really exciting. Like I said, I feel so normal. I haven't felt normal in years. And in fact, I don't think I've ever felt normal since I received that thorn of suffering in my heart. The Lord gave me that spirit of depression and separation from the Lord. And to me, I think that's really what that thorn of suffering did. It made me feel like I was separated from God, because uh, I felt like He made me the least in His kingdom, and I tell you, that's exactly how I felt. I felt like I was made the least in His kingdom, and I was. The Lord asked me where I was in the kingdom when I was a young teenager, and I remember visualizing, where am I in the kingdom? I saw myself behind everybody. The throne was way ahead of me. I could hardly see it. In fact, I don't think I could see it. But I was in the back, and I was not just in the back. I was hiding in the back at the gate, barely getting in the gate, and hiding behind a little palm plant right back there and by the gate, and crunching a little ball, thinking, I don't want him to see me, because if he knew I was here, he wouldn't let me stay. That's how I felt. And as the years progressed, as I grew in the Lord, and I went through the testing, the trials, and the things that I had to go through, the, the Lord got me on my feet and started me walking towards Him and towards the throne, till I wasn't no longer in the back. I was in the middle, and then I was in the front, and then I was up on the throne room, on the throne itself, talking to the Lord, sitting next to the Lord, speaking to Him, not afraid, because the Lord asked me, "Where are you in the kingdom? Where are you?" And now I think this is a sign. I believe this is the sign. This sign of the sun and the moon joined together, crossing America, is a sign of great blessing for the church, a sign that we've come into unity, and that we're not listening to the voice of anyone but our beloved. Okay? Anyway, God bless you. I'm sure I'll have more to say on the subject in a little while, as soon as I think some more through. Anyway, I'll talk to you later. God bless.